up on this Wednesday edition of Newsline at noon, a U.S.-based North Korean monitoring website says it's highly unlikely the regime will conduct nuclear or missile tests in the coming months, citing limited activity at key test sites. Senior diplomats from South Korea, China, and Japan will meet in Seoul today to discuss trilateral cooperation ahead of a foreign ministers' meeting scheduled for later this month. Plus, market watchers are expecting the Bank of Korea to announce a rate cut at its monthly policy meeting on Thursday, with the finance ministry remaining skeptical about the nation's recovery momentum. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's noon Wednesday, March 11th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this lunchtime. North Korea monitoring website 38 North says the country is unlikely to conduct either a nuclear test or launch a long-range missile over the next few months.
Citing satellite imagery, the U.S.-based think tank said there are only signs of regular maintenance at North Korea's Punggye-ri nuclear test site and the Sohae Satellite Launching Station. That said, the website acknowledges that the North Korean leadership could move forward quickly with either a bomb test or missile launch if it felt inclined. There has been speculation the North might carry out a provocation in response to the ongoing annual joint military drills between South Korea and the United States. North Korea sees those exercises as a rehearsal for war, but Seoul and Washington insist they're purely defensive in nature. A top U.S. military officer says much more can be done to keep an unpredictable North Korea in check. General Vincent Brooks is urging the United States, China, South Korea, and Japan to work together on the issue. Now, this follows military talks between Washington and Beijing, a channel of dialogue in which North Korea was rarely discussed before. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The U.S. Army Pacific Commander, General Vincent Brooks, says North Korea came up in his discussions with Chinese military leaders during his recent visit to China. In an interview with the Brookings Institution's Order from Chaos blog on Tuesday, Brooks said he visited Beijing and Hainan last month and had meetings with China's top generals, but he did not elaborate on what the two sides said about North Korea. However, he did emphasize the need for dialogue between the U.S., China, South Korea, and Japan to formulate a coordinated policy to counter the North Korean nuclear and missile threat. Brooks said the regime's continual provocations and lack of transparency means there's always the potential for a military miscalculation. He added that, given North Korea's unpredictable nature, the Pacific Command remains on a so-called fight-tonight posture, and stressed that U.S. troops in South Korea are always on alert. In regards to the U.S. generals meeting in China, diplomatic sources in Washington say it's unlikely much progress was made on North Korean issues. They note that, in previous encounters, China has been reluctant to talk to the U.S. about North Korea, especially in regards to the North's leadership and internal changes inside the isolated regime. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
South Korea plans to impose sanctions on any company that complies with North Korea's recent unilateral wage hike at the Inter-Korean factory complex in Kaesong. Seoul's Unification Ministry says the government plans to outline the possible legal and administrative punishments if they hike wages in March. This follows Pyongyang's decision to up the monthly salary of North Korean workers at the industrial park by 5% to $74. The ministry says that if the measure is implemented, North Korea would earn almost $500,000 in additional revenue from the complex. Seoul says it wants to hold talks with the North on the matter, but the call has so far gone unanswered. And senior diplomats from South Korea, China, and Japan will meet this afternoon in Seoul to lay the groundwork for a trilateral foreign ministers meeting set for later this month. Today's meeting is expected to focus on boosting three-way cooperation, and the issues discussed today will also be on the agenda at the upcoming higher-level talks. Now, one of the key topics forecast to be on the agenda for the ministers' meeting is to gauge the possibility of a trilateral summit a little further down the road. Korea and Japan both see the need for a leaders' summit despite the numerous historical and territorial disputes among the three countries. But China is less keen and is advising a more cautious approach. The trilateral foreign ministers meeting has been stalled since 2012 after Japan nationalized its Senkaku Islands, known as Diaoyu, in China.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel, on a visit to Japan, has once again urged the country to address its wartime past and stress the importance of reconciliation with its neighbours. Merkel's latest remarks add to the mounting international pressure on Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to offer a full and frank apology during his highly anticipated statement on the issue, which will come out in August. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
During the second day of her two-day visit to Japan, German Chancellor Angela Merkel reportedly advised Japan to properly address the issue of the forced sexual enslavement of Asian women during World War II. Japan-based Kyodo News reports that Merkel emphasized the importance of reconciliation between Japan and Korea during her meeting with the leader of Japan's opposition Democratic Party, Kazuya Okada. Merkel added that it's important to face the problems of the past in response to Okada's concerns about a lack of reconciliation with Japan's neighboring countries, mainly Korea and China. A day before, she had urged Japan to face its wartime atrocities, referring to Germany's reconciliatory efforts after World War II. Merkel's latest remarks have been seen as a call for change and the lukewarm attitude currently taken by the administration of Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe toward acknowledging Japan's wartime atrocities. And she's not the only one pressuring Japan to offer an apology. Korea's foreign ministry spokesperson Do Gang-il said on Tuesday that the country expects Japan to build trust with its neighbors by making courageous efforts to face up to its history, just as Germany did after World War II. Also, U.S. Representative Mike Honda has said that Abe should not be allowed to appear before the U.S. Congress without repenting for the country's wartime history. In February, Abe had conveyed his wish to address Congress, and if he does, he will become the first Japanese prime minister to do so. Prime Minister Abe is set to issue a statement in August to mark the 70th anniversary of Japan's surrender in World War II, but there's speculation that he'll try to water down Japan's wartime atrocities. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Exactly 4 years have passed since Japan was hit with a magnitude 9.0 earthquake, triggering a tsunami that destroyed 3 of the 6 reactors at the Fukushima nuclear power plant. The cleanup efforts have continued, with teams of workers trying their best to decontaminate the site of one of the worst nuclear accidents in history, but area residents still harbour understandable concerns about radiation. Son Jung-in reports.
Life is gradually returning to normal in the disaster-stricken Fukushima region as workers continue their efforts to clean up the area and lower radiation levels. Kawauchi, located within 20 kilometers of the Fukushima power plant, is one of the villages that has had its evacuation advisory lifted since the meltdown disaster 4 years ago, but only 7 of its 274 former residents have decided to return. It's hard to say whether the town will ever be the same.
I've told my son to return to the village with his family, but I can't force them as it is ultimately their decision.
Over 117,000 former residents from Fukushima are reluctant to return home due to fears of high radiation levels. And the potential long-term implications, including cancer, are causing more concern. The number of children diagnosed with thyroid cancer is increasing in Japan, with more than 100 confirmed or suspected cases after tests of nearly 400,000 children. Before the disaster, there were just 1 or 2 cases of thyroid cancer in a million among Japanese children. Another concern is the treatment of farmland that remains contaminated with higher than natural levels of radiocesium in some regions. With no plans to address the problem, efforts to decontaminate the soil are generating a massive amount of radioactive waste, which is packed into black bags and moved to temporary sites. Some Japanese people still remain doubtful about what the government is telling them about radiation levels and safety, saying the government has failed to protect them. 손정인, 아리랑 뉴스.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea. Connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broome and Eoh Jin-joo.
I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about...
Korea's finance ministry says the country's recovery momentum is not strong enough, pointing to a need for more stimulus measures. And with the government pledging to pour money into the economy in the first half of this year, all eyes are on whether the central bank will do its part and cut the key rate on Thursday. Punggye-ri reports.
Korea's major economic indicators were all down this year. Output, consumption, and exports all plunged, while consumer prices would also have marked a drop if it were not for a tobacco price hike. The finance ministry is expressing concerns, saying the country's recovery momentum is still weak. It adds that lingering uncertainties abroad, like a weak Japanese yen and a possible rate hike by the U.S. Federal Reserve, also pose a threat to the domestic economy. To prop up growth, the government has announced a $9 billion stimulus package for the first half of this year and called on the corporate sector to raise their wage levels, which will in turn boost domestic demand. Given the efforts made by the government, market expectations are mounting for the central bank to cut its key rate in the coming months.
There's a high possibility that the Bank of Korea will cut the rate in April as it revises down its growth outlook for the Korean economy.
The Bank of Korea will set its key rate for this month on Thursday. Attention is now focused on the central bank's next move, as the prospect of another rate cut also prompts concerns about the country's snowballing household debt. Punggye-ri, Arirang News.
Korea's largest automaker, Hyundai Motor, is reportedly planning on building a new factory in the United States to meet the skyrocketing demand for SUVs in the world's second largest auto market. Hyundai hasn't confirmed the report, but industry sources say the Alabama plant could have the capacity to produce up to 300,000 SUVs a year. Kim Min-ji has the details.
Hyundai Motor will reportedly build a new production plant in the United States as cheap gas prices coupled with the economic recovery is driving demand for SUVs in the U.S. market. Total SUV sales in the U.S. spiked 15% in the first 2 months of the year compared to the same period a year ago. Hyundai's popular Santa Fe model saw a 20% hike in sales to over 16,000 units during the same period. Industry sources tell Korea-based Yonhap news agency that Hyundai has finalized plans to build a new plant solely dedicated to its SUV lineup this year, with an eye on starting production in 2017. Hyundai currently has just one plant in the U.S. that only produces sedans. The sources say the plant located near Hyundai's current Alabama plant will have an annual capacity of 300,000 units. With 2 more plants planned in China and another currently under construction in Mexico, all with the same capacity, Hyundai and Kia Motors' combined total production output should top 9 million units by 2018, with overseas production accounting for 60% from the current 55%. Hyundai, however, has declined to officially confirm the report, saying nothing has been decided yet. Such a move could be seen as going against the Korean government's push to beef up facilities investment at home to boost domestic sentiment and job growth. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Korea's Fair Trade Commission is rolling up its sleeves to stop large conglomerates engaging in unfair business practices against their subcontractors. The antitrust watchdog says it is in the final stages of setting up a section on its website where small and medium-sized companies will be able to anonymously report such practices. Until now, companies had to reveal their name as well as other personal information such as their contact number and email address when filing a complaint. The commission says conglomerates' unfair business practices are rarely reported as subcontractors fear being shunned, including having their contracts terminated.
A new culture centre opened in Seoul last month, and anyone can use it to do creative work and produce new content. So far, the Culture and Creativity Fusion Centre has been a relatively big draw, with roughly 100 visitors every day. Eoh Jin-joo has more.
In this studio, dancers' graceful movements are recorded by a computer using motion capture technology. With the digital 3D models that are created, people can study the choreography or create something new. Here, anyone who has the skills to shoot and edit films can come and make their own movies. At the new cultural center, people can do anything from produce records or a broadcast to make a film or performance. There's even one-on-one mentoring for anyone who's interested in creative work but needs a little advice. And the best part is that all of the facilities are available for free.
The government and entertainment companies are giving opportunities to people who are willing to do business in the cultural realm by providing them with such facilities.
The government is trying to help people who don't know how to start a cultural business by providing funding and consulting programs.
This culture center is part of the government's efforts to transform small ideas and the products of a creative imagination into commercial mass media products. The best creations will be sent to venture companies for production.
I hope the Culture Center will help Korea's cultural content industry to create a fusion of new ideas and the culture industry as we are lagging behind globally.
To broaden the platform for the development of new cultural content, the government plans to open a Culture and Creativity Academy by the end of 2016 for research and development programs and to foster new talent. By the end of 2017, the so-called K-Culture Valley will open with a multifunctional performance hall, a pop music-themed amusement park, and a Hallyu street where tourists can enjoy elements of Korean mass media and pop culture. Kim Hyung-gil, Arirang News.
Korea has once again been named as the country with the fastest internet connections in the world. Global statistics portal Statista says broadband internet speeds in Korea stood at around 25 megabits per second as of the third quarter of last year. That's more than 5.5 times faster than the global average. Hong Kong, Japan and Switzerland followed with 16, 15 and 14.5 megabits per second, so quite a way behind Korea. Korea also has one of the highest internet penetration rates in the world, with 9 out of 10 Koreans using the internet. Now, Korea is known for its high education fever, but it may be pressuring children too much. A report released by the Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs on Wednesday, which measures Korean children's stress related to education, shows that Korean children have a stress level of 50.5%. The index takes elements such as children's preschool enrollment and education achievements into account, and a higher reading indicates that kids are stressed over education. Korean children also had the highest stress levels among the 29 countries surveyed by UNICEF in 2013. Spain, Slovenia and Portugal were the next highest on the list. Time now for a look through the global headlines we're following on this Wednesday lunchtime. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim, standing by at the news center.
Eunice, let's begin in Iraq. We're getting reports that pro-government forces have entered parts of Tikrit and begun to take parts of that strategic city from Islamic State militants.
Yeah, that's right, Jin-joo. Iraq's defense ministry is saying government troops and volunteer fighters from the Shia Popular Mobilization Forces are now stationed in some of the city's main streets, even as several roads into Tikrit were rigged with bombs. The development comes as pro-government forces have succeeded in capturing several towns surrounding Tikrit in recent days, including Al-Alam to the north. On Tuesday, residents were seen cheering as the town's mayor declared it under full control of security forces. Iraqi flags were also seen flying in the wind. The major offensive is aimed at retaking Tikrit under IS rule since June in a bid to also take back Iraq's second largest city of Mosul. Meanwhile, the Islamic State took to the web to wage its propaganda war, posting another murder video, this time of a 19-year-old Israeli Arab man who they accused of being a spy for the Israeli group Mossad. Israel and his family have both denied the charges. The video also featured a young boy shooting the young man. French prosecutors have opened a manslaughter investigation into the twin helicopter crash in Argentina that left 10 people dead on Monday. The bodies of the two Argentine pilots and 8 French nationals were taken to a local morgue Tuesday as a pair of investigators and technical experts were dispatched from France to gather evidence. Among the dead were 2 Olympic medaling star athletes and a veteran sailor who was one of the first women to make a name for herself in the world of sailing. The crash happened near the Andes Mountains in good weather amid filming of a French TV reality show called Dropped. French President François Hollande called the event a cause of immense sadness, saying the 3 athletes had died trying to again push back the frontiers. And over to some European business affairs now. A packed meeting of European finance ministers on Tuesday produced a green light for a $338 billion investment plan to help revitalize the weak European economy. Our Shin Se-min has the highlights of that meeting.
A $338 billion investment plan will be launched to help the struggling European economy recover from its deep economic crisis. The 4-year investment plan was approved during an EU finance ministers meeting in Brussels on Tuesday. If approved by the European Parliament, EU officials say the stimulus plan could be up and running by the end of the year. Under the plan, a $22 billion guaranteed fund will be set up, hoping to attract a total of $338 billion fund through private investments. Slowly, financial pledges from Germany and France have been coming in, with the Eurozone's 2 leading economies, as well as Italy, each pledging $8.5 billion into the project, while Spain says it's going to put in $1.6 billion into the fund. The ministers also gave France an extra 2 years to bring its deficit below 3% threshold. It's the 3rd time France has been granted an extension. The country now has more time to implement reforms and cut spending amid feeble economic growth and low inflation. France has been exceeding the EU's deficit target of 3% of GDP for 6 straight years. Greece's economic woes also came up. Germany's finance minister said Athens will receive no more aid until the country's international creditors are satisfied that it has delivered its reform commitments. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And finally, Burger King has pulled sugary sodas from its kids' set menu items in the States, marking a silent victory for moms and advocacy groups who have been campaigning for healthier eating options for children. And instead of pop, milk or apple juice will be prominently featured as options for their younger clientele. Burger King explained the move was part of the company's ongoing effort to offer options that match lifestyle needs. It follows similar similar changes by competitors McDonald's and Wendy's, which is bad news for the soft drink industry as many Americans start their soda habit when they are children. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says over a third of American children and teens were obese in 2012. Sugary drinks are viewed as a hefty contributor to that trend.
Well, it looks to be slightly milder than yesterday, though not enough to put away our winter coats yet. But things will warm up by tomorrow afternoon, with highs jumping back to the seasonal averages. So all the cold wave advisories have been lifted, but there is a dry weather watch in effect across much of the country, including here in Seoul. So be sure to drink plenty of water, and eye drops can help to keep your eyes moist. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The daytime high here in Seoul will climb up to 5, while the top temperatures in Daegu and Busan will be much higher today, rising to 11, and Gwangju will top out at 10 this afternoon. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju Island and Daejeon should see a high of 8, and Dokdo peaks at 3. Now we're having a transition period into spring this week, so stay warm and take good care of your health. And finally, much warmer days are ahead, starting early next week. Well, that's all for me today, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you, Jim, for the weather update. And this is all we have for you on this Wednesday afternoon.
Yes, Jin-joo and I will be back at the same time on Thursday. Goodbye.